All right, so today we're going to be talking about the idea of the Columbian exchange and how it forever changed, honestly, kind of where we are today with the idea of globalization. So connecting one side of the globe to the other, connecting the Western hemisphere with the Eastern hemisphere and the things that it brought. And there's some interesting stories that kind of go along with this. So what you're going to do is we're going to eventually come back to this map that's on the board there that you'll see on page 572. And that's going to kind of be the major point of emphasis and the major focus of what today's idea is. All right, so the Columbian exchange. It says the global transfer of foods, plants, and animals during the colonization of the Americas is known as the Columbian exchange. Ships from the Americas brought back a wide array of items from that Europeans, Asians, and Africans had never seen before. All right, so it combined all of the stuff that you essentially see at your supermarket today. That was the first glimpse of all of these things being connected. The only way that I can really, kind of give you the idea of something normalcy is like if you've ever seen a child eat something for the first time and like the reaction on their face, whether it was good, whether it was bad, whether it was, too much of a tart taste, too much like a lemon, if you bite into that first lemon for the first time, and how much taste it has, how much acidity, how much all that. So the idea of kids today, but as an adult, okay, as someone who had been on the earth this entire time and they finally taste a potato for the first time. They taste corn for the first time, okay? They taste chocolate for the first time. So the ideas of one hemisphere to the other that are spreading those ideas. It says they included such plants as tomatoes, squash, pineapples, tobacco, and the cocoa bean for the idea of what would come to chocolate. They included animals such as turkey, which had become a source of food in the Eastern Hemisphere. It also includes that entire list of domesticated animals, which would impact the life of us today with our large source of beef, the idea of transportation with horses, the idea of entertainment with horses, also kind of the same part. Perhaps the most important item to travel from the Americas to the rest of the world, though, was corn and potatoes. If you think of everything today that's still made with corn, if you read on the back of an ingredients list, there's going to have some form of corn that's on there, whether it's high fructose corn syrup, even all the way to the idea of, at one point they were trying to get away from gasoline and use what is ethanol, which is essentially a corn-based product to create gasoline, which was ethanol. So corn was a huge deal. Supply chain of food for many different people that are there. So corn, potatoes, humongous deal. All right. And the idea, we'll kind of tell an interesting story about potatoes here in a second. It says both were inexpensive and grow easily, and they're very nutritious. Potatoes especially supplied many essential vitamins and minerals. Over time, both crops became an important and steady part of diets throughout the world. These foods help people live longer. Why would those foods help people live longer? Okay, the overall nutritional value that's in there. What else? The ease of them being able to be grown and the plentifulness of the harvest. Okay, so even if you were only eating corn, at least you had a ton of corn to be able to eat. It could be stored. You could use it for the winter months. And the same thing with potatoes. And then, of course, if you have a bad crop, then you have a potato famine, and then people are going to vacate their source of food and leave to another country. And that kind of leads into it later on. It says these foods helped us live longer. They played a significant role in boosting the world's population. The planting of the first white potato in Ireland and the first sweet potato in China probably changed more lives than any of the kings that were alive during this time. Traffic across the Atlantic did not flow in just one direction. Europeans introduced various livestock into the Americas. These included horses, cattle, sheep, and pigs. Foods from Africa, including some that originated in Asia, migrated west with the European ships. Again, this idea of triangular trade that we were talking about yesterday it starts to mix the Europeans with the Africans, with the Americas, back and forth. So any of those things could jump on one of those ships at one time and make it to one place or the other. That also included disease. We'll talk about that here in a second. Okay, the things that migrated on these ships included bananas, black-eyed peas, yams, grains introduced to the Americas included wheat, rice, barley, and oats. Again, a very heavy source of nutrition, protein, easily grown. Some aspects of the Columbian Exchange had a tragic impact on many Native Americans. So, yes, there's a ton of positives, and there's a bunch of negatives that go along with it. What's interesting is the map that's shown on page 572 that we'll look at here in a second. You know, you got that X symbol up there of the poison symbol, which is for death. But then you got all of these nice, pretty symbols of food that go along there. So like 99% of that map up there is positive things. But then you have that one negative thing that's there. You know, the weighing in on the effect of the population, especially in the Americas, based upon the disease that was brought over, it was a whole lot different than 99% to 1. You know what I mean? That decimated with smallpox, a ton of the Native American population that was there. So the Columbian Exchange had its negativity to it. In the long run, it got us to where we are today based upon the positivity of it, though. The diseases Europeans brought with them, which included smallpox, measles, led to the death of millions of Native Americans. Okay. If we look at the map here, and you see certain things, all right, whether it be tobacco, squash, sweet potato, turkeys, all of the above, okay? What I want you to see is, are they coming into the Americas based upon that arrow, or are they going out of the Americas? The top one, are they going in, or are they going out based upon the arrow? Out, okay? So if it's going out, it is an export. So you'll come back into this one, and I made it to where the arrows are pointing from west to east because it's leaving the Americas. That's an export of the Americas, okay? The bottom arrow shows it coming in, okay, because the arrow is pointing to them. So therefore, that is an import. If I'm importing things, I'm bringing them in. If I'm exporting things, I am getting rid of them, okay? If you get rid of a boyfriend or girlfriend, that's an X, right? So you're getting rid, you're exporting them out, okay? If you're impressed by somebody new, then you're bringing them in. All right, so import comes in, export goes out. Pretty simple on that part right there. All right, so the Columbian Exchange says few events transformed the world like the Columbian Exchange. This global transfer of plants, animals, disease, and especially food brought together the Eastern and Western hemispheres and touched in some way nearly half of the people or all of the people of the world, okay? We're used to this today. It's called globalization. The globe is connected. It's connectivity of the world, okay? This was brand new to them because it connected the entire Eastern half of the world and the entire Western half of the world into one. That's what the major point of the Columbian Exchange was. It brought upon connectivity to the rest of the world. Several foods from the Americas were thought as frightening foods, okay? We take for granted the idea that, you know, people at first were amazed by these things, that were fearful of these. It says terrified Europeans, early on, people thought that the tomato was actually harmful to eat. One German official warned that the tomato should not be taken internally. They thought it was poisonous. They thought it'd kill you with a tomato. You didn't want to be the first person to eat it and figure out that it was poisonous or it wasn't poisonous. You know what I mean? In 1619, officials in France banned potatoes. They said that too frequent use of eating a potato would cause leprosy. And lepers at the time were shunned, were exiled away to make sure that the idea of the boils and everything else with leprosy were not spreading. There was even an instance of a group of people who were starving to death and all they had was potatoes. But instead of eating the potato to figure out, I'm going to stay alive, they didn't want to get leprosy and die of leprosy, so they didn't eat the potatoes. Okay. So again, a lot of confusion, a lot of unknownness of these new things that were coming over. Think about your favorite food. Chances are at least one originated in a distant land. Throughout history, the introduction of new foods into a region has drastically changed lives, for better or for worse. Dependence on the potato, for example, led to the potato famine in Ireland. It prompted a massive migration from Ireland to the Americas, Europe out to search for a new, better life. The introduction of sugar led to one side getting rich and the other side needing enslaved people. So therefore, because of sugar, because of cotton, because of tobacco, the cash crops that are there, it led to the enslavement of another group of people. Okay, so there's, again, huge positives, huge negatives, depending on what side of it they are. We're going to come back to this map here in a second. All right. Capitalism. Capitalism, and the word capitalism is a big thing in our society today. It says capitalism is an economic system based on private ownership, investment of resources, such as money, for profit. No longer was the government the sole owner of great wealth. So the church, who owned the land, who owned the business, who owned the profit, the government, who owned the land, who owned the business, who owned the profit, they were not the only people that could make money. All right. If you graduate and you leave here, how many of you have the opportunity to start your own business? Technically. Every single one of you, right? Okay. Now, some of you may start out here. Some of you may start out here. Okay. Some of your parents may already own a business. And if it is gifted to you, essentially, then you start out up here. Some of you may started a business from scratch. All right. And eventually it gets up here. Every single one of you has the same opportunity as everyone to make a ton of money. And every single one of you has the same opportunity to lose a ton of money. But the idea of capitalism is the government is not in control of the entire profit of wealth. Okay. Good idea or bad idea? Capitalism.
Great idea.
Okay. Why is it a great idea?
Because it works all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it works all the time for the majority of the people. And at least has the freedom to be able to control your own destiny rather than a government saying, your job is this. Your job is this. You will do this when you get to this age. Okay. So people had choice. So you're moving out of a king and queen type system and you're moving into this new land that's full of capitalism, that's full of hope, that's full of life, that you control your destiny. The land of great opportunity. Okay. The land of freedom to create your own opportunity that's there. Okay. This opened up a ton of idea the Columbian Exchange did with capitalism, because now all of these people that had a ship that could get to the Americas, they had an opportunity to make a ton of money, an opportunity to improve their life, had an opportunity to be as prominent as the people of wealth and the people in the government. All right. Along with this came something similar to our stock market, which is the joint stock company. The joint stock company worked much like a modern day corporation. Investors would buy shares in a stock in a company, the involved people combining their wealth with a common purpose. So if you were willing to risk your life to go across the sea and come up with one of these new things that was going to make you a ton of money in one place or the other, there would be rich people who would invest in your idea. How many of you ever watched Shark Tank? That's pretty much what it is. You know what I mean? Uh-huh. So you pitch your idea in Shark Tank to how many people are usually sitting up there? About 4 people. Are all those 4 people rich? Yes. They got tons of money. Okay. Like Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban was not a rich person until the .com boom, technology, and he hit it on there and he parlayed that and diversified his portfolio into buying the Mavericks. You know what I mean? They come from different walks of life. They're there. So because this joint stock company, somebody has made money somewhere and they want to make more money, but they also want to make sure that they don't put all their eggs in one basket. They've invested here and there and here. So then that way, if this one goes bad, then I still have these other 3 to keep me afloat. All right. You're not putting everything into one deal. All right. So let's say like you own a restaurant and you're making a ton of money at that restaurant, but just in case something ever happens to your restaurant, like COVID, you prior had invested in other things. So that way, if one thing goes bad, you still have something else to continue to flow into money. So that way the other continues to stay afloat later on. All right. So joint stock companies were big during that time. Okay. Mercantilism. That's another big word. All right. So prior to this, the government was making this much money. The people were making this much money. In comes capitalism. People were making this much money. The government was making this much money. So in comes mercantilism, in comes heavier taxes. Why would they do that? Why would the government want to tax? Why would the government? It says strictly regulated by the government. Regulation extended to other colonies. Regulation extends to the ships that would pass through. There's going to be a tax on imports. There's going to be a tax on exports. Okay. So why did the government have to heavily rely on taxes and the idea of mercantilism before and after capitalism? I'll give it to you one more time. Before capitalism, government's money was here. People's money was here. Post-capitalism, people's money was here. The government's money was here. Why would the government have to rely on mercantilism and taxes? Okay, so they could do this, right? At least even it out. If they were used to being up here, they needed to at least get to right here. So then that way they were still relevant. They could still do what they needed to do. All right. That still goes on with you today. That's the reason why when you receive your first paycheck and you look at it and you're like, man, I worked 30 hours. I should make this. But then all of a sudden you make less than that because you're paying taxes, you're paying Medicare, you're paying for healthcare, you're paying for Social Security, you're paying for all the above, and that's taken out before you ever receive your check that's there. Okay. That's a semblance of what mercantilism is. All right. That's also what caused the American Revolution. Taxation without representation. You know what I mean? So that was a big deal that's going to lead to things later in the line that's there. Okay. This spurns the trade, the same thing with the idea of gold, with the idea of cotton, with the idea of colonization, the idea of selling what they have. And it's kind of this business market that pops up. All right. Going back to page 572, the Columbian Exchange. Here's what I want you to do. In your notes for today, because this is what's going to get graded on Friday for your notes, I want you to create a split column right here. Imports to the Americas and exports from the Americas. All right. The imports coming from Europe, coming from Africa over, I want you to choose 7 of the most important things in your opinion. Okay. So if death of disease is number 1, and then honestly, if you go to the idea of cattle, number 2, maybe you're a rancher and you think cattle is the number 1 most important thing ever brought over to you. Rank it in order from 1 to 7. You don't have to list all of them. You just got to pick the top 7 in your opinion. Okay. If you're a grape lover, put it up there. All right. Imports and exports. The export part. Okay. Number 1 through 7. Anything from tobacco to chocolate. All right. If you feel that tobacco was big because of the economic push that it allowed for the Americas, rank it up there high. If you think that the death and destruction that tobacco brings later on makes it not in the top 7, don't choose it. It's up to you. Okay. But select 1 of 7, rank them, put them in there. Below that, write 1 small paragraph that says, describe the major impact of the Columbian Exchange then and how it affects us now. Okay. Describe the Columbian Exchange then and how it affects us now. All right. Tomorrow, we'll watch History of Mankind. I will have a test review that is posted on a Canvas discussion for you. So then that way you have your questions to review for Friday when we take the test. It'll be a 20-question test. 10 of those, I believe, are multiple choice. The other 10 are maps, graph, and charts, just like the previous tests that were there. Okay. So make sure you check on that discussion and study those for your test. All right, anybody have any questions? All right, that's today then.